On this channel, I love covering just the strangest stories. The other day I came across an article from Mysterious Universe by the awesome paranormal author Brett Swancer. In the past, I made a couple videos about vampire encounters, and some of those stories are extremely creepy. In Canada, there's a town called Wilno. In the mid-1800s, Polish settlers moved here in great numbers, and they brought their beliefs and their ancient superstitions with them, such as their belief in dark magic as well as undead monsters like vampires. And these people are also extremely religious, or at least most of them are. In the 1960s, a scholar who studied Polish history was very surprised to learn about this massive Polish population that lived in Canada, as well as their ancient beliefs. So he wanted to go there to do some research, as these people came here to Canada well before World War I and World War II. So in a way, these people in this beautiful Canadian town are kind of like a superstition time capsule that the modern Polish in Poland might have forgotten over time due to World War I and World War II. And while this researcher was talking to the locals, he was shocked as they believed in tons of evil creatures, especially vampires, and that these vampires were not just ancient folklore, but they actually lived here in the city. According to these Polish Canadians, there were two kinds of vampires. One of them was cursed at birth as they had some sort of membrane sac on their heads. And these kids are doomed to wander the earth for eternity as undead creatures. But thankfully, or allegedly, there is a cure for these cursed souls. According to ancient folklore, the mother of the child would have to keep this membrane sac for 7 years. Then after 7 years, the mother would grind it up, then put it in her kid's dinner. And if the kid ate all of it, he or she would no longer be cursed, and now they would become normal children. The other kind of vampire is one who is kind of similar, but has two sharp teeth. And this type of vampire cannot be cured. They are truly unholy creatures. Now, I find this folklore quite shocking, as I've never heard anything like this before, and I've done a lot of research in my time about vampires. They also say that a new vampire, I'm guessing one that got bit by one of the originals, would have to kill their whole family. Then they would have to go to the closest church and ring the doorbell, and whoever heard this ringing would be cursed and most likely dead within a year. Which sounds really crazy, but I can understand the ringing of the church doorbell or the church bell that they used to use in the Middle Ages, or still do to this day in some of the older churches. Now let's say back in the day, in the 18th century, some guy who had a little too much to drink was walking home, when all of a sudden he heard the church bell ringing. Then he saw some creepy dude just standing there staring at him. I'm sure that would scare the crap out of him, or anyone for that matter. And maybe that's just how some of these legends begin. Now, some of these locals in Canada, to this very day, claim that they themselves have seen these creatures. One man who wished for obvious reasons to stay anonymous told this researcher that one night on his farm, a vampire snuck into his daughter's room and drew blood from her arm. Now, I'm not sure if they actually saw this vampire doing this, but the next day her daughter was extremely weak from blood loss, and that there was a visible ring on her arm where this happened. But they never told anybody about this, as they were scared. They thought they would think that her daughter was now a vampire. And this reporter saw that this man was really worried, and that he believed that this really happened. There was also another story of a child born to a vampire. Or maybe the child just became a vampire. And at first he was fine, but after he got baptized, he started to die. This eyewitness stated that he saw this with his own eyes around 40 years ago. Now there's a lot more to the story. It was kind of hard to follow, but basically the mother saved her child's life by dropping her blood on her baby's face. But then right after she did this, she started to die. Now the priest, knowing about these things, was able to save the mother's life, but he couldn't save the child. One man, a Mr. Kilby, said that his grandfather was a vampire, and that 14 people, including his own son, died. And all these 14 people died very mysteriously. He even told this reporter that there's a militia in this town who kill vampires. Then they kill them again after they've been buried so they can't come back to life. He also stated that this happens all the time, especially in the past. And the locals, well, they don't like to talk about this, as they don't want the outside world to know how evil this town really is. It's believed that there are dozens of people who have seen or know who these vampires are. Now there are also stories of witchcraft and other cryptids like evil dwarves and werewolves, but it seems vampires are the most feared, and in their minds, the ones that are actually real. Now once these articles were written by this reporter, whose name I can't pronounce, the news flocked to the city looking to investigate these vampires. And to their surprise, the townspeople thought that these articles were insane and that this was a good place to live and that there were no such thing as vampires. Now the news were kind of shocked by this because these articles made it seem that these people were crazy. But truth be told, this is what their ancestors believed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And in my opinion, legends do come from some sort of truth. And there are creatures who do suck your blood, like bats, dozens of insects, and even a strange bird known as a knockpecker. So you never know, maybe vampires do, or at least at one time did exist. But they probably would be a different human species than us, who evolved differently. Now today this town, because of these articles that were written way back in the 60s, people think it's a cursed and haunted location. Which I think is kind of cool. Like Salem here in the United States. These towns, especially say on Halloween, would be a great place to visit. There's just something about being scared that most of us seem to enjoy. Unless of course you're home alone at 1 in the morning and you start hearing voices coming from under your bed. Until next time, this is Paranormal Junkie. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned.